Who was Solon? What things did he accomplish during his lifetime, and why should we remember him? Born in Athens, Greece in the year 640 BCE, Solon, plain and simple, was one of the most influential men in history. He was a merchant, a philosopher, a poet, and a legislator. He is also considered one of the 7 wise men of ancient Greece, and is one of the few people in antiquity to have actually deserved his own biography. As a matter of fact, most of what we know about his life is because it was written down by the great historian Plato in his master work, The Life of Solon.
And too bad that he never finished the story he'd brought back home with him from Egypt. He was forced to abandon that story on account of the civil conflicts and all the other troubles he found here when he returned. Otherwise, not even Hesiod or Homer, or any other poet at all, would ever have become more famous than he. That's what I think, anyhow. Well, Critias, what story was that? Asked the other. It's the story about the most magnificent thing our city has ever done, replied Critias, an accomplishment that deserves to be known far better than any of her other achievements, but owing to the march of time and the fact that the men who accomplished it have perished, the story has not survived to the present. Please tell us from the beginning, said the other. What was this true story that Solon heard? How did he get to hear it? Who told him? In Egypt, Critias began, in that part of the delta where the stream of the Nile divides around the vertex, there is a district called the Saiatic. The most important city of this district is Sais. This, in fact, is also the city from which King Amasis came. This city was founded by a goddess whose name was Neith in Egyptian and, according to the people there, Athena in Greek. They are very friendly to Athens and claim to be related to our people somehow or other. Now, Solon said that when he arrived there, the people began to revere him. Furthermore, he said that when he asked those priests of theirs who were scholars of antiquity about ancient times, he discovered that just about every Greek, including himself, was all but completely ignorant about such matters. On one occasion, wanting to lead them on to talk about antiquity, he broached the subject of our own ancient history. He started talking about Pharaonius, the first human being, it is said, and about Niobe, and then he told the story of how Deucalion and Phrygia survived the flood. He went on to trace the lines of descent of their posterity, and he tried to compute their dates by calculating the number of years which had elapsed since the events of which he spoke. And then one of the priests, a very old man, said, "Ah, Solon, Solon, you Greeks are ever children. There isn't an old man among you." On hearing this, Solon said, "What? What do you mean? You are young." The old priest replied, "Young in soul, every one of you. Your souls are devoid of beliefs about antiquity handed down by ancient tradition. Your souls lack any learning made hoary by time. The reason for that is this. There have been and there will continue to be numerous disasters that have destroyed human life in many kinds of ways. The most serious of these involve fire and water, while the lesser ones have numerous other causes. And so also among your people the tale is told that Phaethon, child of the sun, once harnessed his father's chariot, but was unable to drive it along his father's course. He ended up burning everything on the earth's surface and was destroyed himself when a lightning bolt struck him. This tale is told as a myth, but the truth behind this is that there is a deviation in the heavenly bodies that travel around the earth, which causes huge fires that destroy what is on earth across vast stretches of time. When this happens, all those people who live in mountains or in places that are high and dry are much more likely to perish than the ones who live next to rivers or by the sea. Our Nile, always our saviour, is released and at such times too saves us from this disaster. On the other hand, whenever the gods send floods of water upon the earth to purge it, the herdsmen and the shepherds in the mountains preserve their lives while those who live in cities in your region are swept by the rivers into the sea. But here in this place water does not flow from on high onto our fields, either at such a time or any other. On the contrary, its nature is always to rise up from below. This, then, explains the fact that the antiquities preserved here are said to be the most ancient. The truth is that in all places where neither inordinate cold nor heat prevented, the human race will continue to exist, sometimes in greater, sometimes in lesser numbers. Now, of all the events reported to us, no matter where they've occurred, in your parts or in ours, if there are any that are noble or great or distinguished in some other way, they've all been inscribed here in our temples and preserved from antiquity on. In your case, on the other hand, as in that of others, no sooner have you achieved literacy and all the other resources that cities require, than there again, after the usual number of years, comes the heavenly flood. It sweeps upon you like a plague and leaves only your illiterate and uncultured people behind. You become infants all over again, as it were, completely unfamiliar with anything there was in ancient times, whether here or in your own region. And so, Solon, the account you just gave of your people's lineage is just like a nursery tale. First of all, you people remember only one flood, though in fact there had been a great many before. Second, you are unaware of the fact that the finest and best of all the races of humankind once lived in your region. This is the race from whom you yourself, your whole city, all that you and your countrymen have today are sprung, thanks to the survival of a small portion of their stock. But this has escaped you, because for many generations the survivors passed on without leaving a written record. Indeed, Solon, there was a time before the greatest of these devastating floods, when the city that is Athens today not only excelled in war, but also distinguished itself by excellence of its laws in every area. Its accomplishments and its social arrangements are said to have been the finest of all those under heaven, of which we have received report. When Solon heard this, he was astounded, he said, and with unreserved eagerness begged the priest to give him a detailed, consecutive account of all that concerned those ancient citizens. I won't grudge you this, Solon, the priest replied. I'll tell you the story for your own benefit as well as your city's, and especially in honour of our patron goddess who has founded, nurtured, and educated our cities, both yours and ours. Yours she founded first, 1,000 years before ours, when she had received from earth and Hephaestus the seed from which your people were to come. Now our social arrangement, according to the records inscribed in our sacred documents, is 8,000 years old. 9,000 years ago, then, did these fellow citizens of yours live, when laws and whose finest achievement I'll briefly describe to you. At another time we'll go through all the details one by one at our leisure and inspect the documents themselves. Now, many great accomplishments of your city recorded here are awe-inspiring, but there is one that surely surpasses them all in magnitude and excellence. The records speak of a vast power that your city once brought to a halt in its insolent march against the whole of Europe and Asia at once, a power that sprang forth from beyond, from the Atlantic Ocean. For at that time this ocean was passable, since it had an island in it in front of the strait that you people say you call the Pillars of Heracles. This island was larger than Libya and Asia combined, and it provided passage to all the other islands for people who travelled in those days. From those islands one could then travel to the entire continent on the other side, which surrounds that real sea beyond. Everything here inside the strait we're talking about seems nothing but a harbour with a narrow entrance, whereas that really is an ocean out there, and the land that embraces it all the way around truly deserves to be called a continent. Now, on this isle of Atlantis, a great and marvellous royal power established itself, and ruled not only the whole island, but many of the other islands and parts of the continent as well. What's more, their rule extended even inside the strait, over Libya as far as Egypt, and over Europe as far as Tyrrhenia. Now, one day this power gathered all of itself together and set out to enslave all of the territory inside the strait, including your region and ours, in one fell swoop. Then it was, Solon, that your city's might shone bright with excellence and strength for all humankind to see. Preeminent among all others in the nobility of her spirit and in her use of all the arts of war, she first rose to the leadership of the Greek cause. Later, forced to stand alone, deserted by her allies, she reached a point of extreme peril. Nevertheless, she overcame the invaders and erected her monument of victory. She prevented the enslavement of those not yet enslaved, and generously freed all the rest of us who lived within the boundaries of Heracles. Some time later, excessively violent earthquakes and floods occurred, and after the onset of an unbearable day and night, your entire warrior force sank below the earth all at once, and the isle of Atlantis likewise sank below the sea and disappeared. That is how the ocean in that region has come to be even now unnavigable and unexplorable, obstructed as it is by a layer of mud at a shallow depth, the residue of the island as it settled. What I've just related, Socrates, is a concise version of old Critias' story as Solon originally reported it.